Welcome to another edition of Looking Back at Baseball History here on OSC Sports Network. I'm KP Wee. While the Toronto Blue Jays are playing against Cincinnati at Olympic Stadium in Montreal at the end of their exhibition schedule, it's the second straight season that the Blue Jays are playing at the Big O. In 2014, Toronto played the New York Mets in an exhibition series there as well. And of course, with these exhibition games in Montreal, longtime Expos fans are once again talking about how the 1994 strike screwed Montreal's chance of winning that year's World Series. So it's a case of here we go again. Now, would the 1994 Montreal Expos really have won the World Series? Let's take a look back here at baseball history with some of the points I'm going to bring up. At the time of the 1994 strike on August 12th, the Expos were the best team in baseball with a 6-game lead over the Atlanta Braves in the Eastern Division. They had an 8.5-game lead over Houston in the NL wildcard standings, but were they really going to go to the World Series had the season played out to a conclusion? Well, for starters, a 6-game lead in the division in mid-August is not insurmountable. If you look back at the 2011 Braves and Red Sox, who blew 8 and 9-game leads in September and went on to miss a postseason. In 1995, the Seattle Mariners overcame an 11.5-game deficit in late August to knock out California. There was also the 2007 Phillies, who were 7 games out in mid-September and then knocked out the Mets. How about Atlanta, though? In 1993, the Braves had come back from a 10-game deficit to win the NL West over San Francisco. In 1991, the Braves had come back from a 9.5-game deficit at the All-Star break to overtake the Los Angeles Dodgers. So clearly the Braves knew all about playing catch-up and winning ball games in September. With Maddox, Glavine, Avery, and Smoltz pitching for the Braves in 94, I should say, it wouldn't have been a stretch to see them go something like 20-5 over their next 25 games or so. And, even Kent Mercker, their 5th starter, was having a career season as well in 94. The Braves were kings of comebacks, and you might have done it again in 1994. And who knows? Houston, trailing by 8.5 games in a wild card, might have overtaken the Expos as well. We just don't know. And also, the Expos were a young team that hadn't made the playoffs. Who knows how they would have done in the first trip to the postseason? You think about the Atlanta Braves in the 1990s, they couldn't close the deal until their 4th trip to the playoffs, winning the 1995 World Series after disappointments in their first 3 trips. You go back to the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1990, 91, and 92. They had the best player in the game in Barry Bonds, and they won the NL East 3 straight years. They never made the World Series at all in that stretch. In 1995, the Cleveland Indians made the playoffs for the first time since 1954, and they didn't win the World Series. This was a Cleveland Indians club that had a potent lineup, and they won 100 games in the 144-game schedule. In fact, those great Indians teams of the 90s did not win a single World Series title. They made the playoffs every year from 1995 to 1999, but no World Series championships. And also in 1995, the Yankees made the playoffs for the first time since 1981, but again, they also didn't win the series. They couldn't even get out of the division series, actually. Now, teams that make the postseason for the first time after a long absence normally don't win the entire thing the first time around. Yes, I know the Florida Marlins won the World Series in both years that they made the playoffs in 1997 and 2003, but they're an anomaly. And we can also look at other examples like the Los Angeles Dodgers with a great pitching staff in 95 and 96. They made the playoffs both years but couldn't win a single game. The Toronto Blue Jays had to lose in the playoffs 3 times before finally winning the World Series in 92. The Kansas City Royals as well had many postseason failures before winning it all in 1985. So why would the 1994 Expos, why would they have won the entire thing had the season played out? It would have been the first trip to the playoffs since 1981, but the first ever postseason appearances for their core players. You just never know, and you cannot simply assume that the 94 Expos would have won the World Series had there not been a strike. Now you look at Pedro Martinez. He was on that 1994 team, but he wasn't yet a dominant pitcher that he would become later that decade. In fact, it was Pedro's first season as a major league starting pitcher. Who knows how he would have fared down the stretch. The Dodgers didn't think he would be a major league starter and traded him to the Expos for second baseman Delino DeShields prior to that season. Now, Martinez had pitched in a career-high 107 innings for the Dodgers in 1993. He was used as a reliever by the Dodgers and only made 2 starts in 1993. Then in 94, the Expos made him a starter, and in the month of July in 94, Pedro Martinez had an ERA of 6.89 in 6 starts. That's almost a 7 ERA in 6 starts in the month of July in 1994. And at that time, he was approaching 150 innings already for the season. And who knows how he would have fared in September and October if the Expos had gotten that far. It was no guarantee that he would have come through in the playoffs. Again, he had never pitched that many innings before in any season. And of course, we'll remember John Wetteland being the World Series MVP for the Yankees in 1996 as he saved all 4 of New York's wins against Atlanta. But I'm sure most of you have forgotten that Wetteland, the year before in the 1995 Division Series with the Yankees, got lit up by the Seattle Mariners. Why am I bringing out Wetteland? Because, of course, John Wetteland was the closer for the 94 Expos team. Now, the 95 Division Series with the Yankees happened to be Wetteland's first ever taste of postseason baseball, and he was shaky in the first game. He gave up an extra inning home run to Ken Griffey Jr. in the second game, a contest that the Yankees rallied to win. And then Wetteland also gave up a grand slam to Edgar Martinez in a tie game in game number 4. Now, Buck Showalter brought him into the tie game that night in Seattle, and he walked the first guy he faced, gave up a single, hit Griffey Jr. with a pitch, and then gave up the grand slam to Martinez without retiring a single batter. And then in the decisive 5th game the following night, Showalter didn't go to Wetteland at all, instead letting David Cone pitch in the 8th inning and even calling on Mariano Rivera, who at the time was an unknown rookie, and then using Jack McDowell, normally a starter, to finish that game. So yes, Wetteland was a World Series hero in 96, but in his first playoff experience with the Yankees in 95, he had a 14.54 ERA. So how would he have done with the Expos in 94 in the playoffs? We never know. You just don't know. And Larry Walker, another member of the 94 Expos, batted .214 in his postseason debut with the Colorado Rockies in 1995. So again, if the 94 Expos had made the playoffs, how would Larry Walker have hit? We don't know. Then look at manager Felipe Alou. Yes, he was a great manager and was able to bring out the best in his players, but in 2003, when Alou was managing the San Francisco Giants, they won 100 games, and they had Barry Bonds and Jason Schmidt on the team. Schmidt that year was lights out with 208 strikeouts, averaging over a strikeout per inning. He won 17 games and launched just 5. Bonds, meanwhile, hit 45 home runs and batted .341. Yet the Giants lost in the division series against an inferior Florida Marlins club. I think the turning point in that series was Jose Cruz Jr., who would win the Gold Glove that year, dropping a fly ball on right field in Game 3 in extra innings that cost the Giants the win. They then got eliminated the following afternoon. So even though the Giants won 100 games, even though they had Barry Bonds and Jason Schmidt, they still lost. There was that costly error by Cruz Jr. You just never know in the playoffs. If you're an Expos fan, you can't just say, oh, we would have won the World Series without the strike. We just don't know. That was unfortunately Felipe Alou's only playoff appearance as a manager, and he lost that series. The big part of that was because they lost Game 3 with Cruz dropping a fly ball in extra innings. But things like that happen in the playoffs. You just can't predict how things would turn out. Even if you have Felipe Alou managing the club, with Pedro Martinez on the team, with John Wetteland, with Larry Walker, and so on and so on, you just don't know how things would have fared had there really been a postseason in 94. And also with the 1994 strike looming, teams were reluctant to make trades on July 31st. The Yankees, for example, had Steve Howe closing, and they didn't make a trade for Cubs closer Randy Myers, who was available. The Dodgers, who had bullpen issues as well and had Todd Worrell struggling, also did not pull the trigger for Myers. Had those contending teams made those late season deals, they might have been deeper than the Montreal Expos. So fans of the Expos who constantly say to this day the strike killed their World Series season, I would say, well, think again. Would they really have been able to hang on to their lead in the division and wild card? Would they have closed the deal had they made the playoffs in the first trip to the postseason for their core players? Would Pedro Martinez have pitched well in the playoffs in his first full season as a starting pitcher, having never pitched that many innings in the big leagues up to that point? How would they have fared against teams that loaded up before the trade deadline? We just never know. Thanks for joining us again for another edition of Looking Back at Baseball History on OSC Sports Network. We'll talk to you again next time.